Welcome, PVA kids, to our next lecture here in U.S. history. Today we're going to be covering the Northwest Ordinance and population growth. Now, we're going to go back in time just a little bit. Now, we've already talked about the presidencies of George Washington and John Adams. But today what we're going to focus on is we're going to focus on how the United States was growing during this particular time. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the 1780s. And in the 1780s, what we're going to start to see is we're going to start to see the United States growing westward, especially across the Appalachian Mountains, which is something that we had wanted to do as a society and as a people going all the way back to the 1750s. You might remember that that was one of the big causes of that French and Indian War. Now, the United States, and after this revolution, we start to see a lot of Americans starting to move west. And the area that they were moving into was this region right over here. Now, our very first government was the Articles of Confederation, as you might remember. And what they did was they started to establish a really good system of settling this western land. Now, once again, it's this area in blue that you see on the map. And in 1787, Congress is going to pass what is called the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. And it's going to create a very orderly way to settle these western lands. Now, this area in blue will eventually include the 5 states of Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. And you'll need to know the 5 states that made up that Northwest Ordinance. Now, in those 5 states, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 did a few important things that you need to know. The first thing that it did was it established public schools in the Northwest Territory by selling land, and some of the money from the land sales went to establish the first public schools in the United States. The second thing that it did was it established the Ohio River as the boundary between free states and slave states. The Ohio River is the bottom part of the territory that you see right here. And finally, slavery was completely outlawed in the entire Northwest Territory. And so what we see from the very earliest part of the United States is that now we're going to start to see a split between the North and the South over the issue of slavery, an issue that will continue all the way until the American Civil War. Now, Americans were not done growing, and we continued to move westward into these different territories. And that continuation of growth would continue all the way until the early 1800s, all the way up until and through when Jefferson became president in 1800. During Jefferson's presidency, the U.S. population was growing really, really fast. If you look at the chart on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you can see just how fast we were growing. In fact, our population was nearly doubling about every 25 years. And from 1800 to 1810, we grew by more than 2 million people in just 10 years. And we started adding tons of states. For instance, Ohio became a state in 1803, Kentucky in 1892, Tennessee is added in 1796. But the problem is that the United States was still constrained by the Mississippi River and by New Orleans, which was in French control, down over here. So Jefferson wanted to go ahead and solve this problem. And so what he did is he sent a delegation to France to negotiate the purchase of New Orleans, just the city. Now, Napoleon, however, he had bigger plans, and he wanted a little bit more money. And so what he suggested was that instead of just selling the city of New Orleans, he would sell all the French territory in America to fund his wars that he was fighting in Europe at this particular time. And so, in 1803, Congress is going to approve the purchase of what is called the Louisiana Territory from France for $15 million. You'll need to know who we purchased the Louisiana Territory from. Now, it was a giant piece of land, and if you look on the map, you can see that the Louisiana Purchase is going to nearly double the size of the United States. That's another thing you got to know. Now, we were really, as a country, excited about all of this new western land. And in particular, and something you also need to know, is that this gave us full access to the Mississippi River and to the Port of New Orleans. And this was important because the Mississippi River was the prime transportation route for farmers, especially in the West. And this allowed them to move west and make money. The problem was, though, is that most of the Louisiana Territory, Native Americans already inhabited those lands. And eventually this would cause problems as they were forced off their lands for American settlers. The other problem, though, was that we didn't really know what was out there in the Louisiana Territory. We didn't know what we'd really bought. And so Jefferson is going to send Lewis and Clark to explore that Louisiana Territory. Now, Lewis and Clark are going to come back with 3 important discoveries and 3 important accomplishments that you need to know. Those 3 important things on their what is called the core of discovery, were, number 1, they paved the way for Western expansion. Number 2, they discovered many new species of plants and animals. And eventually, they discovered a route to the Pacific Ocean, which they reached later that year. Well, that's all our notes for our Western expansion and population growth. Remember the different things that we highlighted in the video, especially about the Northwest Ordinance and about the Louisiana Purchase. Have a fantastic day. Until next time, bye for now.